Hello and welcome to Lessons to Grow, the podcast on good corporate leadership in times of change. I'm Armin Rau, international manager and entrepreneur. Today, again, the C-suite is sharing insights on good corporate leadership, and that's why we've got Sarah Demmer with us today. She is the CEO of SF Partners, a leading executive search firm from the UK. So stay with us and listen to Sarah's C-level leadership insights right after the intro. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, great to be here.
Good to have you. Thank you very much for being with us. To start off, would you mind just telling our listeners a little bit more about you, your track record, your current position, and so on?
Yeah, perfect. So yes, I'm Sarah Demmer, CEO of SF Partners. I started my career in a completely different industry in mergers and acquisitions and found myself very quickly buying and selling recruitment businesses. I did around 40 buy-side and sell-side transactions before moving into the recruitment sector, where I had a period of time as CFO of the business that I'm in today before being promoted up to CEO. I've been in that role since January 2020. And in that time, we've transformed from a small niche player in the Midlands in the UK, focused only on finance and accountancy, to today, we are in 5 locations across the UK. We specialise in 6 key areas, being finance, technology, transformation, professional services, engineering, and executive search. And we've also now started our international expansion, starting in Germany.
And that's why you are based in Germany right now, I understand.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm based in Frankfurt, and I'm leading the build out of our German operations.
Sounds good. So you've got 2 jobs at a time, right?
Yeah, most definitely.
Good. Our topic is corporate leadership, or say good corporate leadership, and that's the core of Lessons to Grow. How do you define good leadership today, and what separates the bad from the good and the good from the excellent?
Yeah. I think, the job of a leader, any C-suite leader, but particularly a CEO, is so varied in terms of the subject matter that you need to be sitting across, that, different leaders are technically capable in some areas. Other leaders are, might be good at marketing. Another one might be good at finance. I think all of that stuff, it is almost by the by in a way. You can, when you get to the level of being in a true leadership position, what you can do matters far less than how you make people feel. And for me, I think the true differentiator with good and excellent leaders is really about how authentic you are. Do you bring your real self to work? Are you authentic and open and honest about how you go about your day? Do you make people feel like they're working for you as a person, or do you make people feel that you are a line manager, they're a reporting line, and you're both occupying boxes because a corporate entity says so? And I think the leaders that I've seen over the years who are really, really excellent are those that are able to bring people with them on a journey, because first of all, they've bought into you. They know who you are, good and bad. Leaders are, I think, often under so much pressure to be perfect, to look like they're on top of things. And fundamentally, people don't buy into that. Everybody's human. Everybody makes mistakes. And I think the more that we as leaders are open about what we do know, what we don't know, where we're unsure, but we're going to try it anyway, where we are sure because we've done this before and we've got the experience, and we really take people on the journey with us, I think that's where you get the buy-in, because people don't buy into a job title or somebody occupying a position in a corner office. They're buying into you and the journey that you're taking them on and the emotions that you make them feel by being open about where your own challenges are. And when you have that authenticity, you get the buy-in. It's much easier to take people on the journey of the vision, of what you're trying to build, of the mission that you're on. And it's also crucially much easier to get through difficult times. Not everything is going to go right. And when people understand why you made a certain decision, where the knowledge gaps were, but we're going to try it anyway. When things don't work out, nobody gets too stressed about it. Nobody sits there saying, oh, what an idiotic decision she made. They understood it. They were part of the journey because it was authentic from start to finish. And I think businesses that are built on that kind of authentic leadership are always the ones I see that are able to navigate through lots and lots of change and are able to typically grow faster. They fail a lot more than less authentic businesses, but they also move forward and achieve things. And, for every 10 things that they try, even if they get 5 wrong, they're getting 5 right. And I think for me, it all comes back to that linchpin of authenticity is what enables all of this to happen.
Sounds very interesting, especially, coming back to authenticity. That is something, obviously, that strikes me immediately. And do you think there are limits to authenticity? Can you really be the person you are after you've passed, the gates of the premises?
Yeah, look, there's always a limit. The way that you might be on a Saturday morning, with your husband and your kids is not the same as how you're going to show up at work. Yeah. But I think, there's levels of professionalism that matter. But I think authenticity is about not trying to pretend to be something that you're not. You don't have to be kind of all your warts and all and, messy hair and no makeup and what have you. But I think I see so often leaders, especially newer leaders who haven't yet got comfortable in that leadership skin, trying to play a part of a leader and trying to be what they think people want to see rather than just trusting their own instincts. And I think when I talk about authenticity, that's what I mean. It's being true to who you are and what guides you. You don't need to tell everybody 100% of the foibles that are going on in your brain, but don't tell them things that aren't in your brain just because you think it makes you look good.
Yeah, sounds good. Don't pretend to be somebody who you aren't, right?
Yeah.
Happens quite a bit with people who are out of depth, where you see they're most probably not big enough for the job. From my experience, they are losing authenticity immediately. Yeah. Really,
it takes a lot of confidence to be authentic because you have to trust that people are going to like you. And if you don't have that confidence and trust, the natural instinct is to try to be something different, isn't it? So, I think it's also important that people come to these positions when they've learned their way into them. You learn over time as a leader, don't you, what works, what doesn't work, which aspects of your personality people really buy into that you should, really double down on. And I think sometimes, as you say, it happens when people get promoted too quickly. They haven't had the time to learn their way into that. And so the panic sets in, and that's suddenly when you get this kind of very disconnected, inauthentic experience.
Yeah, also people who talk themselves into a job. You're recruiting all the time. So one of the biggest challenges is, to really, at the end of the day, do the litmus test and say, listen, is this person really the right person for that job or not? Which experiences are you making there? This, what's the risk of making a bad decision? Let's put it like that.
Well, from a recruitment background, I'll give you a little tip. Those that sell themselves for something are usually a lot less capable at doing it than those that don't. It's always the people who have the least belief in themselves, or not necessarily the least belief, but like you say, don't try to talk themselves into a position. They just show up and actually do it, who are the ones that deliver most effectively and authentically. So beware of overselling.
Yeah. Now, that's the topic. That's we're already touching on the next topic I'd like to discuss with you. As you're working with corporate leaders all the time, what do you see as their greatest challenge when trying to lead their organizations well? In this day and age, obviously, those challenges were different 40 years ago, and they will be different in 40 years. But if you're thinking about today and the specific, challenges that we are facing, what are their challenges? What are the central challenges of the C-suite?
Yeah. I say two main things come to mind. I think one is actually a real challenge for good leaders is how to be everywhere. If you're a good leader, you have a really positive impact on your business, on the people around you. People draw energy from you. People feel supported and inspired by you. And when you're all of those things, people benefit from your time and from your presence and from being around. And as your business grows, when you're a small startup and everybody's kind of in a room, that's very easy to bring that energy and, the infectiousness of that. When you've suddenly expanded and you've got, 20 different locations and people all over the place, how do you bring that energy and yourself to the whole business? Is actually an advantage for poor leaders who can hide behind process, who don't bring that energy, that when they're not there, it actually doesn't make a difference. And obviously that's not necessarily an advert for, why you should be a poor leader. But I think it is a unique challenge to those who lead in a way that I'm saying, through being very authentic and inspiring. Everybody wants that. But is there a limit? Is there a ceiling? And I think in the last few years, especially since COVID, it's become much, much easier to be a bit more omnipresent. People are used to, okay, the boss is somewhere else, but we jump on a quick Teams call, or, everybody's on chat or on WhatsApp messages or whatever it might be. There's a lot more channels to kind of have your tentacles everywhere, but it really is a difficulty, especially as businesses are going through, kind of fast scaling. You have to replicate yourself very, very quickly. And that is difficult because, as I say, authentic, infectious leadership is a hard skill to learn. And really only the most excellent leaders have that. So I'd say that's one thing that's a universal challenge, particularly when you get into the really big worlds. You have to rely on, just different ways of working. The second thing I think that's unique at the moment is AI and how fast everything is changing. And I think there's, in the world that we work in, there's two types of businesses right now. There's those who are throwing themselves into the unknown, recognizing that, as leadership teams or as, tech departments, we don't necessarily know everything there is to know about AI, but we know that we need to learn, we know we need to play, we know we need to figure out what we can make work for us at the moment. And then there's the camp of those who are just waiting to see what everybody else does, and then they'll pick it up later, maybe because they don't have the in-house expertise, they've got other things that they need to focus on, they don't have the confidence to want to get into that right now. But I think it's a really unique challenge because the world is changing so rapidly, and the power of what we're capable of now, not only is it significant compared with where we were only a few years ago, but it's continuing to move at pace. So it's a full-time job for anybody to keep abreast of that and actually be informed about what the art of the possible is, which of course people who already have very busy jobs don't have time to do that. And so we're in a world where, you're driving the car and changing the wheels at the same time, and it creates so much change, so much flux, that the best leaders can never have a perfect concrete plan about what they're going to do about this. So you have to get comfortable living in a world that is constantly changing, where you can't have a strategy. Your strategy has to be to flex and to evolve and to constantly change and to be ready to do that. And I don't think for a very long time there has been a backdrop like that. I think we're living through quite a unique, exciting time. And as this gathers pace, in the next 3 to 5 years, I think we're going to see a lot of businesses shake out of the market who haven't been able to keep pace with what's happening.
Do you meet many leaders of that ilk? Leaders who you would say, wow, this guy or this lady is perfectly capable of, working, as you say, on one hand, keeping the energy level high, also transmitting the energy, into the organization and into the hearts and minds of their managers, and at the same time live with this unbelievable level of uncertainty that we've got today. I personally believe that this AI thing is a bigger revolution than the internet. That's my personal I'm convinced of that, and we still don't know what change this is going to bring. On the other hand, if you're leading these organizations, you have to deal with it. So how do you see this? I mean, are many of the people you're speaking to ready? Is there still a lot to do? What can be done?
There's a really, really broad spectrum. I'd say, that there are increasing numbers of business leaders. I think, look, you can't be expert at all of this stuff unless you're running a tech business and it's your job to. But I think you can really see the difference between those who are taking the time to learn about what's becoming possible and how they can potentially deploy that into their businesses to improve their service levels or, whatever their focus is. And those who are just not interested in holding maybe more defensive positions. And look, some of it depends on the industry as to what's appropriate. But I think there's a reality that business leaders, whether you want to or not, you kind of don't have a choice. You have to become comfortable with this changing environment, because it is the environment, whether you are comfortable with it or not, it's what's happening. And so it is the backdrop against which everybody's having to do the job. It'll be interesting to see whether CEO or C-suite turnover increases over the coming years as we start to flush out those who, have not kept pace with it. And, I'm sure we'll see lots of businesses really start to skyrocket as well, who have deployed it well.
Still increasing, Sarah? Still increasing the turnover?
No, I'm just saying it will be interesting to see if it starts increasing.
Oh, right. Okay. I'm sorry about that wrong.
Yeah.
I thought it had already started, because that would have been my next question too. Sorry for interrupting, but quite an interesting point here could be, do we need younger leaders faster now? What do you say?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I became CEO when I was 34. I was quite young at the time.
Honestly, you're still quite young.
I'm a little bit older now. But that there is a real balance to be had in a leadership role. As I was saying, you have to be ready for the position, because you hold so much weight on your shoulders, other people's careers, the health of your business. These are not positions to be taken lightly or by people chancing their ability to do it. What you do matters. And so I think having young energy influencing leadership teams is definitely important. I do think, there are things I know now and things that I would deal with differently now than when I first came on board in my early 30s. And so experience matters. Having been through things before is a number one driver of your ability to handle, a work situation well. But at the same time, as you say, the world's changing massively. So I think the age of the leader doesn't necessarily matter. I think it's who they surround themselves with, who they're allowing themselves to be influenced by. If you're an older leader and your entire circle is people of your generation who are maybe not tech savvy, then of course that's going to cause you problems. And similarly, if you're a younger leader and you only surround yourself with that type of people, you're not getting the benefit of, years of experience and wisdom of people who've been there and done it. And so I think there has to be a balance in every situation. I don't think one is necessarily better than the other, as long as you're drawing on the right experience.
Brings me to another topic. I'm absolutely convinced that diversity in leadership and also in teams can add an awful lot of value. Younger managers with older managers, women and men, I don't know, various cultures, different languages, you name it. What do you see in the market as far as that is concerned? Because I think that could give us a real impact, because as long as we are able to deal with differences, we also keep a certain flexibility, which again equips us for the challenges that we've just talked about and which are ahead of us. What's your point of view?
I've always taken a bit of a different view on diversity, and I say this as an Asian woman leading a business. And someone who, when I came in, I moved our gender pay gap from 23% to 0 in 3 years. So, we've been able to have a massive impact on our business. but I didn't do any of it deliberately. I didn't sit there and examine the numbers and say, what's going on here or what's going on there.
Yeah.
I just got on with building a great business and putting the best person for the job into every role. And I think when you do that, you naturally end up with a mixture of people, because you're promoting on skills. You're not promoting on, who looks the part or who's been playing golf with who or whatever. And so I have to say, I am not in favor of forced diversity targets. From my own perspective, I would never want to feel that I had been put into a senior position or been promoted because of my demographic background. I want to know I got that promotion because I earned it, and because I was the best person for the job, because that is what should be happening. We shouldn't be putting people into roles unless they are the best person for the job, no matter who they are. So I think that's one important thing. I think the other thing I would say is that, in my view, what matters a lot more in creating a diverse culture is alignment around values. I think when you have alignment around what you are motivated and ambitious to achieve in life, generally, and I know there's exceptions, but generally people can look past every type of demographic difference if your values align, if you're ambitious, if you all buy into the same vision, if you're all motivated to build the same thing. Generally we're in a world, at least in Western Europe, where men and women have worked together for a very long time. We're all used to very multicultural environments. And it doesn't mean that there isn't more to be done, but I think where I see businesses go wrong with diversity is by actually trying too hard to do diversity by numbers, instead of just creating a brilliant culture, alignment around values, and then trusting that the best people for the job will come into that. And by human nature, the selection of people is going to be a diverse one, because that's the environment that we live in. So maybe a slightly unpopular view, but I don't think diversity always has to be done in a forced way. We've proven that we can create a really positive and diverse environment by just getting on with all doing a brilliant job.
Understand. So nevertheless, the gender pay gap, excuse me, that was a hard one, is a fact. It does exist. I think in Germany it's about 23%, which is horrendous. You see, so let's say you and I, we're doing the same job, we're equally qualified, we're doing a brilliant job, and you earn 23% less than I do, which is completely, insane from my point of view. Now, what would you say? Because that is really an interesting topic. So you've done that. You eliminated that gender pay gap. You only promoted by skill. What would have happened? Okay, you did the gender pay gap. What would have happened? Say, if still, I don't even know what the mix is between female and male managers in your organization. Maybe it's also,
it's slightly more women now. When I came in, there was one woman, and now we've got 65% women.
Yeah. But what if you had applied the same approach? So you've got your vision, you've got your values, everybody is, huddling around, this common value system, going into the same direction. And the result is it's you and 80% men and 20% women. Would you be fine with that?
Yeah, I think I would.
Theoretically, it would happen, regularly, what you say,
Yeah, I believe that the right person should do the job. Now, just want to clear one thing up. There's quite a lot of misconception about the gender pay gap. There are instances where a man and woman doing the same job are paid differently. We've all seen and heard of them. Most of the gender pay gap, and certainly, the one that existed when I came into SF, is driven by the lack of senior women. So if you take the average of all the men's pay and the average of all the women's pay, that's the difference in the gender pay gap. So when you have far less senior women, the average is, of course, just lower. And so I think, Germany is definitely further behind the UK in that regard. I think there's some structural and social issues in Germany, particularly around, parental leave and childcare norms and those kind of things that I think create a different challenge. and do prevent more women from getting to those senior positions. But look, I have to stand by what I say. If the right people for the job all happen to be older white men, then those are the right people for the job. I think there's always a question about, is your pool wide enough in the first place that those are the only people coming through? I think you always have to look at, what's the makeup of the general population? And if you're only attracting one certain demographic of it, is your recruitment process right? If you're satisfied that everybody's got the same chance and everybody's being given fair access to the same opportunity, particularly in something like the world I do, where you don't need to have gone to a fancy school, you don't need to have had lots of, you don't have had any advantages in life in order to, barriers to entry are quite low. You come in and you learn on the job. You just have to want to do it. If you're satisfied that your recruitment process is open and fair, and that's the result, then I have to stand by that. It would annoy me. I would wonder why that was the case as a woman. But as I say, I wouldn't want to be a woman who was put there just for a demographic reason, and I wouldn't want to do that to anybody else either.
Yeah. Understand. Okay. Very, very interesting topic. Now, coming back to corporate leadership, governance is a huge topic today.
Yeah.
We're talking about, at least in the EU, loads of regulations. There's supply chain regulations and ESG, and corporate social responsibility has been around for ages. How does this affect the leadership styles or corporate leadership, the formal side of leaderships? And also, I would like to understand from your point of view, how do these rules help or hinder the performance in the C-suite? What is your view on that?
Yeah. I mean, maybe not everyone would agree with me. I'm naturally somebody who will swerve rules and procedures and things that feel very restrictive. And so, my immediate answer is that they hinder more than they help. Now, sometimes there's really good reasons for things, ESG rules, there's lots of, in financial services sector, there's lots of really important rules that there's good reasons why they're there. I think, leaders need to, of course, know what are the things that really matter and where are the red lines. But my own personal experience, when the CEO spends too much time tied up in red tape, they cannot be doing a good job of leading and growing their business, because the two things tend to be the antithesis of one another. And so I think you just have to have a really good team around you who you trust to take care of those things, and who will flag the right things to you at the right time and take the rest of the noise away. So much of growth and leading and inspiring is about, how to innovate and how to break down barriers and move into areas where, things haven't been tied up with red tape, or, you haven't yet, it's a new market. And so it's untapped territory, or it's, something exciting or expansion. And so I think my own personal leadership style, that's where I like to spend my time, but I'm lucky to have a very good team who take care of, some of the more boring, if we can call it that, stuff. It's really important. It has to be done properly. We want to be a responsible business. But too much leadership time spent on things that can restrain growth is not the right balance.
I understand. So am I getting you correctly? Everything which is, which needs to be fulfilled from a legal point of view, of course, you have to work on it, but in general, try to be as unbureaucratic as possible. Would that be kind of a good?
Most definitely. One of the kind of founding principles for when I came into my role was that we're a medium-sized business, and I grew up in the corporate world. I was at a Big Four for the first 7 years of my career. And I always saw that there was an opportunity to create a best of both worlds environment. Big businesses are a great training ground. They've got so much scale, financial firepower, polish, infrastructure. but they don't have that agility of a smaller business. Creating a world where we've got all of that. We're a private equity backed business, so we've got all of that infrastructure and firepower behind us, but keeping the agility, the flexibility, the innovative thinking of a small business. So we've built our business out as a collection of small businesses rather than one kind of ever-growing corporate, precisely to create this best of both worlds. So this is just my own personal opinion. There's obviously lots of very successful big businesses out there who do it very well. But I find that the more you can retain that flexibility and agility in pockets of your business, the easier it tends to be to respond and grow to what's happening in the market.
Okay, so to quote the old picture again of the flotilla of speedboats instead of a huge ocean.
Exactly.
Ship.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Very good. So it's as if it had not been hard enough so far. We are also now in a period of geopolitical, how can I say, trouble. Or, excuse me?
Fun? Geopolitical fun?
Sometimes it sounds funny sometimes what's happening, what you're hearing, doesn't it? But it's geopolitically, everything is quite shaky, I would say. It's difficult, I mean, it's all, stability has been an illusion all the time, I would say, but the level of instability and the lack of reliability that we have today in a geopolitical context has not existed for quite some time. Yeah. So now doesn't really help. If I am a C-level leader, I have to cope with that. So what are central competencies, skills, attitudes? What does it in general mean for corporate leadership and leaders of the future to be prepared for that? And also, how can they deal with such a tremendously challenging situation in this point of time?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be the type of person who likes to roll with the punches, I think, to enjoy a leadership role today. Somebody that's all about careful, 20-year planning is not enjoying their job right now. So, I mean, look, I think, as I say, it kind of is what it is. If you're not prepared and you don't have the ability to adapt, then, you've probably given up the role already. Yeah. We've been dealing with this for quite a while now, since 2020. It's been, one thing after another, hasn't it? So I think in some ways it was really useful for me. I started my current role in January 2020, obviously with a beautifully prepared 3-year business plan, which didn't go according to plan whatsoever as soon as COVID started. So, I got off, you can say, on the right foot, that everything was about adapting and changing. There'll be CEOs who've been in roles for 20 years where they had 15 years of, low interest rates, things were being calm, stable, maybe particularly after the financial crash, kind of things started to recover. And they've been doing the job a certain way for a long time, and now suddenly they've had to change. They've got a tough job on their hands. But I think, there's a certain level of kind of sadisticness that comes with doing a C-suite role anyway. That you deal with a lot of problems, you learn to absorb a lot of stress, and help people through stresses that they're dealing with, deal with business issues. And so I think for most C-suite leaders, you've got to where you've got to by already having navigated quite a lot of challenges, battles, waves, whatever you want to call them. Now, the waves have definitely got a lot bigger, but hopefully, we're all more experienced. We've got the ability to deal with that. So I don't really have any, helpful advice for anyone. I think it's lean into it, see it as all part of the fun of a leadership role.
Be nimble and quick, I think that's
it's much easier to,
without being, an activist. You see, that's the danger. I'm constantly, doing things, and kind of losing my head. Um, that's from my point of view. I mean, it's really, finding the middle ground here, isn't it? Well, what would you say?
You definitely have to be enjoying yourself to do a role like this well. And so, um, whether it's your natural style or not, I think leaning into it as, a bit of a game of, whack-a-mole is always a good mindset to start with.
Have you, as a recruitment company, adapted your selection process according to the changing environment, or have you done this all the time? I guess maybe you've been in recruitment now for some 10 years or something.
Yeah, 11.
Yeah. Have you seen it changed? Have you seen it changing over the years?
Mm.
You know, uh,
Um,
because you see, you can always do the odd personality test and the standard assessment center and all that. On the other hand, I could imagine that approaches do change, with the different challenges that we have, and also the different the differing or developing or evolving requirements, that we have on the C-suite. And I would also imagine that they are quite differently today from 2015, or
yeah.
at least a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, if I look back 10 years ago, the thing I think that has changed the most is not necessarily the recruitment sector. The recruitment sector's evolved massively in terms of how we do things, technology tools, that kind of thing. But the fundamental art of recruitment, finding the right person for the right job, the core of it, I'd say, is still very much the same. The thing that has changed is the businesses that we're hiring for have become much, much more candidate and employee centric than they used to be. So they understand now. And, I think there's partly a generational shift that's happened with some of the younger, when certainly my generation and those above me came into the workforce, there were certain expectations around, you work in a job, you find a job, you work your way up, you stay with a business, you build your career. And I think the premium around constant switching, side hustles, that kind of culture just didn't exist back then. People tended to be wired to be loyal to an employer until they had a reason not to be. Whereas today, that just isn't the case anymore. And it took employers quite a while to get wise to that. And I think, we had this huge wave after COVID where there were already quite a lot of employers, I'd say in the late like 2018, 2019, really starting to get good at this. But it's only after COVID when most of the rest of the market caught up to understand that recruitment, it doesn't just happen automatically because everybody wants a job now. You have to really, really sell why somebody wants to join your organization. What do you stand for? What are your values? What impact are you having on the world around you, positive and negative? What's the environment? How do you treat people? And so I think the role of the recruiter has become more well-rounded because we're advising our clients on a much broader range of things now. We're we in our own business have gone through this huge transformation on the same lines that we've won awards for. So it's very good for us to be able to go and sit with our clients and say, this is how we've done it. This is how you will attract the best people. And this is how you will retain those people. Going back more than 10 years, probably back 2030, staff turnover was much, much lower. It was very normal to be a kind of a lifer in a business. And then, going back 10 years, it wasn't necessarily so much the case, but there's definitely more turnover today, and people just don't feel that same need to stay put in one place. There's a premium placed on variety and different experiences and trying a bit more of different things. And so I think that's the big shift that I've seen. And, particularly now that the next 10 years, if I was to kind of look ahead where we're going to be, I probably can't quite accurately predict to 2035, but maybe at least the next 5 years, lots of jobs are going to be automated. And so that's going to cause a whole new disruption. There's going to be lots of people who have to retrain, who have to try their hand at something different. And so I think this increasing turnover and reducing longevity of people in businesses is going to continue to be a theme for quite some time.
So, all right. Okay. So your generation was still that kind of be loyal, make a steady, get a good education, get a good job, make it, that's called, the steady Eddie attitude, something like that. And then you're seeing the shift with the Generation Z or earlier.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I'm one of the oldest millennials, so probably from younger millennials onwards. Yeah. That shift starts to happen. But it's not a hard and fast rule. Different people are different, but that definitely from that younger millennial onwards. Probably when the rise of social media kind of coincided with people starting.
So late 1990s, maybe born in the mid to late 1990s.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good. 3 most important skills of these leaders in such a world.
You mean for people trying to recruit?
To cope with it, to cope with it, to be successful, to develop organizations, to create growth, to live this, to be a good leader, to be a good corporate leader. What are the 3 most important skills from your point of view?
Sleep. Got to be really good at looking after yourself, I'd say, is the first thing.
Good personal, so physical fitness, basically.
Yeah. The whole put your own oxygen mask on first, and you're much better at helping others. I think
no more workaholics around there.
Yeah, I mean, you can still be a workaholic. You just have to know, when enough's enough, and you got to go and
that's workaholic. He does not know, or she doesn't know when it's due, you see.
I'm still very much a fan of a work hard culture, but look after yourself hard too. So I mean, that's one of the things that successful people often neglect, and for me personally, I've found that the more I look after myself, the better I am at my job. So I'd say that's one thing. Start with you. Secondly, I'd say back to the authenticity point, there's layers of it. Nobody is a perfectly 100% authentic human being on their first day in a C-suite role, but I think constantly leaning into trying to be as much of yourself as you can be, share as much of your reality with your people so that they understand who you are, I think is really important. And then the third thing just has to be just being open to continuous learning. I don't believe that business leaders with a fixed mindset will ever achieve much. They might get lucky. They might be in a protected industry where you just, you're churning out steel widgets all day and, there's not much that is going to change. But I think for most of us, you need to keep learning, evolving, keep that mental agility, keep your mind open, that things can be done better, differently than you've done them before.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that brings me to another question, which just comes to my mind, Sarah, and I'm really interested in your point of view. I know it from my own experience. So I worked as an international manager. I ran subsidiaries of big corporates abroad. Worked as a managing director of standalone companies, etc., etc. The only thing, and what all these positions had in common, I just got thrown in at the deep end, So nothing, swim or sink kind of attitude, etc. Obviously, you're learning a lot, but I must admit, you're also making a lot of mistakes that might be avoided if you had somebody who had told you before, things that you can't know because you have not been in this situation before. So, talking of which, would you say everybody who goes into such a new role, something which I never had, should have a coach? Should be, and then the next question, it can be quite a difficult situation if you're looking for these people inside the organization, because especially in corporates, there's a lot of politics going on. It's very difficult. I would think that it's still the same today. It's difficult to find trust. It needs time. You're new, etc. So, what's your view on that? Because that's a classical HR topic. So it's your home turf.
Yeah. So definitely in favor of coaches and mentors. I'd say, early in your career, the internal mentor is actually really useful. They're the people that help you navigate the politics, learn, who you need to know, take you under their wing. when you're in a leadership role, I've had an external coach who's nothing to do with my industry or business or anything for years. I really would recommend it. And, sometimes people go into it thinking, oh, what are they going to tell me? I kind of know it all. And actually, even sometimes when I arrange a session or I see that there's a session in my diary and I think, oh, I haven't really got anything to talk about today. And you come out of it thinking, oh my God, I actually had so many things to talk about. I just hadn't realized that these were problems that I was not, I hadn't dealt with, or things that were on my mind, but actually I knew the answer. I just needed somebody to help me, get it out of my brain. So I would absolutely recommend a coach. Some business leaders I know have multiple coaches. I'm not at that level. I'm not sure I could afford the time, but definitely would recommend it.
Okay, good. Well, for several things, mental coach, sleep coach, maybe, whatever. If you can't sleep or whatever. Anyway, I do believe so too, because there's one other danger that I've seen is that once you get into these positions, believe it or not, many people do believe they know it all. You see, they think, oh, now I've made it. Now I'm the big guy. And that's a real danger, to lose a little bit, ground under your feet. And here also, I would believe an external voice can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I agree. I think also when you're in a position of seniority, when I first became a CEO, somebody said to me, it's a little bit like being the queen. Everybody suddenly stops telling you the truth and just tells you what you want to hear. And it really is true. I work extremely hard to try to get people to tell me problems, but it's human nature, isn't it? People want to put their best foot forward in front of their boss. And I think having somebody who you trust, who can hold a mirror up to you without any consequences, you're not their boss, their career doesn't depend on you.
Yeah.
And sometimes give you a bit of a metaphorical slap if you need it. I think that's really important, because it is easy when you're in a position of authority and people, tell you that your ideas are great and tell you what you want to hear and don't want to upset you. You can start to believe, oh, I'm so clever and I have all these great ideas and everybody agrees with me. Is it really the reality of things though? And I think having that person who isn't afraid to tell you about yourself if they think you need it, I think that's really, really important.
Yeah. So do I. Good. Now we're talking corporate, but this podcast is actually also quite intentionally made for SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises. So, and they do not have these resources, you see, in general, as large corporates. So how can they prepare better for disruptions and manage upcoming crises with these limited means? What's your take on that?
Yeah. Well, I would actually say that small businesses are at a real advantage compared to corporates. Yes, they don't have as deep pockets, but they can move a heck of a lot faster than a big business can. They don't have lots of layers of decision-making and bureaucracy that need to be gone through. There's not lots of, kind of agreement that's got to be had across the board. They can get on and make things happen. And generally, they have more fungible staff. If you imagine, take an example of a finance function in a corporate, that finance function might have 20 people just in accounts. One person only does, staff meal tickets. Another person only does, client invoicing. In a small business where your finance function might only be 5 people and everybody does a bit of everything, in a crisis, you can move and turn people to different things very quickly and easily. And that's true, with back office staff, sales staff, in a way that people in bigger businesses don't always have. The expectation of agility that they do in smaller businesses, don't always have the breadth of experience, because obviously the nature of them, the job that they do tends to be, not always, but certainly until you get to the very top levels, tends to be a bit more narrow. And so I actually would say that small businesses should be really aware of the power that they have to move and respond quickly. Their people generally, usually, not always, but usually the kind of awareness and communications around what's going on in the business is a bit tighter just because it's smaller and, there's less people to get across. So usually most people have got at least some access to the boss. They know what's going on. They know what the pressure points are. You don't need big town halls because there's maybe only a couple of offices. So I think recognizing that power, not putting yourself in a mindset of, I'm just a little business and I haven't got any money, but actually I'm just a little business. Look what I can do in a really short space of time if I need to. And I think especially depending on the stage of growth, entrepreneurial businesses that are quite early stages, often there's a founder there who's put their entire life into this. And so, you better make sure that you're gonna sort the problem. And so I think personally, with all of the turbulence going on in the world right now, I'm quite happy to not be in a really, really big corporate leadership position. I think those people have very tough jobs right now because there's a lot, the oil tanker is big and it needs a lot of movement. I'm happy with my many speedboats, and so I think small business leaders should see that as a real strength.
How's the market in general, recruitment market right now? Especially, I don't know so much about the UK, I must admit. Right now, Germany is not really, in an economic upturn, so to speak.
There is still a lot of demand in both countries. So lots of client demand, but there is a lot of uncertainty on the candidate side. People are being really careful about decisions. They don't want to get it wrong. There's also
afraid to make the move. Yeah,
exactly. There was also a period of really rapid wage inflation after COVID. So there's quite a lot of people that have priced themselves out of moves as well. They've just become too expensive. So they've got to stick where they are until their experience has caught up. So I wouldn't say the market's on its knees. There are lots of businesses out there that are still investing, still moving forwards. Lots of international businesses in both countries where you might have, a US or an Asian parent that's got a branch over here. And so the local economic backdrop is not always the only factor around whether they're growing and investing. Obviously, certain industries are doing better than others as well. So I'd say when you take it as a macro, things are fairly flat, but there are pockets of really, really intense investment and growth. And obviously, we do a lot in the private equity backed space. So those businesses, they've all got lots of investment, they're growing. And so there definitely are opportunities out there. There's been a period last year, the market was much slower than it is this year. I think there's a natural cycle in business where when there's uncertainty, people pause and they want to wait and see what happens. That pause on investment has got a shelf life. You can't pause forever. Businesses have got, shareholders, they've got targets they've got to meet. And so we're coming out of the pause period and businesses are just starting to get on with it. They're just starting to say, look, this is what it is. The world is what it is. If there's going to be new tariffs, we're just going to have to deal with it. And so let's get on with our plan. Just getting on with things now, being a bit more conservative, recognizing that there's a lot more scope for turbulence. So you don't want to overly invest in, maybe lots of expensive fixed cost workforce. But there is definitely lots of room for growth. And I think for individuals who want to look for a new role right now, there's some really good opportunities out there, because when investment's been on hold, it tends to be big investment decisions and opportunities that are going to create lots of growth. And when you're in a business that's growing, it's obviously really good for your career because you grow with it. And I think those that are too cautious and wait until everything kind of comes back again, they'll miss those opportunities. So there's quite a unique window, I'd say, for the next 6 months for people looking for the next step up in their career.
Perfect. Sarah, SF Partner certainly sees organizations during repeated cycles of disruption. Now, talking especially about disruption, and transformation, what would you say? What is important for a C-level leader?
Yeah, I think you have to be really, really clear about what you're trying to do in a transformation setting and be honest about why you're doing it. I think we sometimes see when transformations fail, it's because the leadership haven't been honest about the real reasons they wanted to do it, whether it's for fear of upsetting staff or worrying people about their jobs or whatever it may be. And I think successful transformations require the support and input of your business and the team. And when that does involve difficult conversations, sometimes, nearly all transformations involve some kind of redundancies because you're going to stop doing something and you're going to start doing something else.
Yeah.
Or it requires people to upskill or change their roles. And I think people are not stupid and respect being told the truth. And so I'd say that's a real important part of any leadership transformation, is just be really, really clear about why you're doing it. And if you aren't confident enough to articulate that reason to your people, then you need to think again about your plan, because most of the time, you're reliant on the business to make something happen. As we say, culture eats strategy for breakfast. If you haven't got the buy-in of the shop floor, the best laid transformation plans are probably not going to come to fruition anyway. So keep going back until you've got a plan that you are confident to stand up in front of the whole business and explain without hiding anything, without fudging anything. And if you can do that, you're onto a winner.
What are the biggest risks during these times for these leaders?
It's always execution. There's always things in a transformation that you didn't really know until you start doing that. And then you get there and somebody says, oh, this is not what we thought. Okay, then we need to revisit. And again, I think there's a danger of feeling like, okay, I look stupid now, and are we going to be honest and tell the truth? And as I say, most people are intelligent and understand. And so I'm just going into things with the understanding that there are going to be some bits we don't know and that we maybe haven't thought through and we haven't got right. And we want our business to support us through that. As long as you're open and honest about things, and not a lot that can go wrong because you haven't set expectations that were false. But yeah, execution every time.
Perfect. Yeah, I love it, because that in my management career, obviously now as an entrepreneur, I lead a 20 people organization. You have to execute. There's no room and no room for apologies. Let's put it like that. In larger organization, there's loads of room for apologies. And one thing which happens a lot is that, just because a decision has disadvantages, you're not taking it, or you're not executing what you've decided. You see, there is no decision without disadvantages, just have to do it. I've seen very, very few organizations with that, what I call executive discipline. You see, just do it and live with the consequences, because there will be negative consequences. You just have to weigh them up against each other and make a real decision here. Good. Now, final thing. I've got favorites as corporate leaders, people I've always looked up to. So obviously as Steve Jobs, very much because of his vision, basically, and his, persistence. And there's another guy you probably haven't heard of, but because you're too young. His name is Lou Gerstner, and he took over IBM in 1994 when that company was losing $4 billion. So they made a loss of $4 billion. You see, most organizations in the world don't make $4 billion of revenues, but this company, produced losses. He turned it around with one iconic sentence when he was asked at the beginning what his vision was, and always the journalist was, Mr. Gerstner, what's your vision? And at the end he said, well, listen, guys, the last thing I need right now is a vision. You see, he just, got on with it, and made it happen. So great guy, great guy. Good book about him, Saving Big Blue. Anyway, do you have favorite corporate leaders? And if yes, who are they and why?
Yeah. I struggle with this question. I think there's so many people out there who you can draw different things from. The leaders that always speak to me are the ones who aren't afraid to be a little bit different and who are brave enough to be outspoken about things. So the one that actually comes to mind for me is a bit of a bizarre answer, but the guy who runs Ryanair, is it O'Leary?
Really?
They're not afraid to just, call it like it is, say what it says on the tin, do what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of flying Ryanair, but I like the leadership approach that is brave and open. And
he's got a Greek name. I don't remember his name. Yeah.
That's one of the ones that jumps out to me. I think, if I ever click follow on somebody that I'm, seeing on LinkedIn or on Instagram or whatever, it's always the people that are unafraid to say something different or say what's on their mind. I think, if you're just saying what everybody else says, what value are you adding to the world? Why does anybody need to bother to listen to you?
Yeah, it's easier as an entrepreneur, I would say. If you're looking at Richard Branson, he just built the whole thing up from scratch. I read his autobiography, unbelievable. It's like a Jules Verne novel, you see, but unlike Jules Verne, it's reality. This guy's more kind of an adventure story. So quite interesting. And I do agree with you, being different is certainly attractive. Unfortunately, not so feasible in corporate environments, I would say. But there's not more pressure in there. In the entrepreneurial world, obviously, a guy like Jobs could say whatever he wanted. At the end of the day, you can't if you are, say, the CEO of British Airways. Really, I think. Yeah. Anyway, we've come to the end, Sarah. I'd like to thank you for this wonderful conversation. Really great and interesting insights into the C-suite from a C-level manager and working with C-level people. So I'm totally sure that our listeners will really benefit a lot from this session. So thanks a lot. And
thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And see you soon.